Welcome back to Devotions from History. On May 28th of 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed into law the Indian Removal Act of 1830, but not without a bitter debate in Congress. The opposition was led by the senator from New Jersey, Theodore Frelinghuysen, who was a descendant of one of the leaders of the Great Awakening, and he warned Congress with a dire prediction that if they did not beware encroaching on the sacred rights of their Indian neighbors, that the agonies that would come to future generations of the United States would be serious. However, he was chided for mixing his evangelical Christianity with his politics, and the bill was passed by just one vote. Wow, can one vote make a difference? It really did divide our Congress. Matter of fact, the congressman from Tennessee, Davy Crockett, after all of this mess of the Indian removal was over, looked at the rest of them and said, you know what? Y'all can all go to hell. I'm going to Texas. And he went to the Alamo. But that's a story for another day. The Indian Removal Act, what it did was it promised that the Indians in many of the southern states would be given land west of the Mississippi, notably in Oklahoma, in exchange for their ancestral homelands. Armed forces were sent in to forcibly remove thousands of Native Americans from the lands and the farms and the homes that their families had had for generations. These homes, many of them, were then gambled off to white settlers in a lottery. One of the soldiers said in his journal later, I fought in the war between the states and have seen many horrible things, but what I was asked to do in the Cherokee removal was the cruelest work I ever saw. It was called the Trail of Tears. Thousands died from exposure, starvation, and disease. The treatment of Native Americans is one of the saddest and most indefensible acts of the United States of America. And I am glad to know that there were some Christians who stood firm and fought against these kinds of atrocities. But unfortunately, too many of my own faith even stood silent or maybe even joined in. Here is a lesson that we need to learn from our own history of Christianity. Our founder, Jesus Christ, gave us an example that said that we treat each person with a sacredness because they are made in the image of God, regardless of their race, regardless of their ancestry, regardless of their age or their capabilities, regardless of how inconvenient they may be to our goals. Each human being is to be afforded dignity and treated as such. And as Christians, it is our job to lead the way in that. I'm thankful for the example of men like Senator Frelinghuysen, who, regardless of what it cost him, regardless of how they chided him for mixing his religion with his politics, he stood firm against what was really, and history proved it, a bad law. So today, on the anniversary of the Indian Removal Act, go on of your way today to treat people with the dignity that Jesus Christ affords them because they are created in the very image of God. I'll see you next week on Devotions from History.